Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Perdue. I am a nerd, and boy, is it hot out there. Don't you hate people that complain all winter long about how cold it is, and then as soon as it gets hot, they start complaining about how hot it is? I always tell people that we are so fortunate to live where we do, because those people in California and those people down in Florida, not having the seasons change the way we do, they don't appreciate what we have. And we do, so I will stop complaining about the weather. Instead, I will complain about something else. This is the, gosh, what month is it? May 2013 Tabs 3 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. And this is a monumental event because it is the last Tabs 3 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. No, we're not getting rid of the Tabs 3 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. We are making them into the Tabs 3 Virtual User Group Meeting and the PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. They will still be on the last day of the month, last Monday of the month. This one is not, you may have noticed, but as you probably figured, next Monday is Memorial Day, and so we will not be having it that Monday. They will still be on the last Monday of the month. The Tabs 3 Virtual User Group Meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne, will be at 1 o'clock, and the PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting will be at 2 o'clock. Now, how do you know? Well, because we'll send you an email the Thursday before, which is probably why you folks are here right now, unless you are listening to the recorded version. So this is the last one that's combined. Today we are talking about vendors in Accounts Payable and how to manage them. And Mary Jo will take that topic, and I'm going to talk about clients and contacts in Tabs 3 and their relationship that was introduced with the release of version 16.1, something that caused a lot of turmoil and a lot of angst for a lot of people. So we're going to try and sort through some of that stuff and let you know what's going on and help you to make the most of that functionality and to get by how things are different. Now, before we do that, I'm going to show you that this is probably on the right-hand side of your screen. This is called the GoToWebinar Control Panel. If you'll notice, there are some buttons that jut off to the left of the main control panel, and the top button looks like arrows pointing to the right. If you click that, this big control panel will slide right out of the way. This will still be visible, and this button will change at that point to arrows that point to the left. And that means that you can slide this big control panel back out, and you would do that if you were wanting to ask a question but at the same time feeling shy. And by that I mean you can type a question here. Leanne, our humble moderator, will interrupt us at a point where it's appropriate. We'll ask your question on your behalf. If you have follow-up questions, just keep typing them. Leanne will be watching for them. And then we'll carry on as soon as we've got your questions answered. Now, if you have questions and you're not feeling shy and you'd rather ask them in person, click this button. It looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upwards in front of it. That means raise your hand. Again, Leanne will be monitoring this, and at the appropriate time, she will unmute you so that you can ask your question. She'll make sure you get it answered, and then she'll mute you back up so that you can continue eating lunch. And so without any further ado, I'm going to do the one thing I always forget to do, which is give keyboard and mouse to Mary Jo. And once I've done that, I think it's appropriate for me to get rid of that and to turn it over to Mary Jo, who's going to talk about managing vendors and accounts payable.
Okay, I am over here in AP, and we're going to talk about vendors, as Paul said. Vendors, you know, you have to have one defined and set up in there before you can create an invoice or a manual check. So the little UPS-looking guy over here is where we add all of our vendors. If you go into invoice manual checks and you try to type in one and it doesn't pop up, you know you don't have one created, so we just come over here and then we go ahead and click on that to create our vendors.
Now, Mary Jo, I am not seeing you move. Did I click on the wrong? There we go. Now you can move. Okay.
Okay. All right, let's try it again here. There we go. Is that me?
Yeah, it is you.
Yay. Okay, so here is our vendors. Now, usually when you set up your vendors, they each have their own number here. And you can even set up whether or not you want decimal places after that. So it could be 203.00 or just one decimal place or 3, depending. Because just like our clients, when you set those up and have a client in a matter, you could have a vendor and then a sub-vendor underneath it. So that's what those decimal places can be used for. Now, I believe in our test system we just have it as just the plain number, but you might have I don't know, maybe FedEx, and then maybe you've got 2 different ground and maybe another that you have to pay. I don't know. That's kind of a weird example, but there could be something out there where you do have a vendor and then a sub-vendor. Maybe it's a court and you have a sub-court or something like that that you're writing those checks out to. You could have those underneath the decimal place. Now, I have been on site at certain clients, and they have 1.00 is a vendor, 1.01 is a vendor, 1.02, 03, all the way up, and it's all their vendors are number 1, and they have decimal places for all the others. And I probably wouldn't recommend doing it that way. I think each decimal number before the decimal should be a different vendor, just like our clients, and the number after should be whether it's a submatter or not. So just a little FYI things I've seen. But we can go in and we can look at the list and see what we have. If there are any vendors that are already out there with that name, you can start typing in the name to find it. And that's going to bring me to another part of what we're going to talk about, because somebody might type in County Cook and somebody else might type in Cook County. And so you might have 2 vendors that end up getting created out there. And I'm going to show you how to fix that. But for an initial setup, you can come in and just start typing. And if I start typing, whoops, it was County Cook, I can find that I have one in there, and I can start setting up or looking at that vendor information. So this one I already have, and there we go. I have first last name, just like, or last slash first name, I'm sorry, just like we do with our clients or contacts. You can do a name search, so you can change that so that that makes sense. So this is where it would be helpful to type in something that everybody would be looking for it under. Doesn't have to match the vendor name at all. The address, you can fill that in. And this is what will print on the check. So if you're writing this out, you want to make sure that you put that in. If you've got window envelopes that you're using, we want to fill that information out. If there's a federal ID and you're doing 1099 information, you're going to want to make sure that you know what that federal ID number is. And then you can also do the 1099 info. Now, when you do the drop-down, it has box 1, 3, 6, 7, and 14. And I don't know if you're like me, I don't remember what those are from time to time. So what we have with that yellow question mark, with our page-specific help, you can click on that, and we will look at that box. I think I've got a little bit of a delay, so there it goes. I can choose that 1099 info right here, and it will tell me what box 1, 3, 6, 7, and 14 stands for. So I know that box 1 is for rent, and box 3 is for prizes and awards, things like that. So that kind of helps you along if you're not sure what box to choose. If this is not going to be a 1099 client, you don't have to keep track of that. We just leave it as none. So let's get that out of the way. You can put contact information in here if you have a special person that you want to have this check be attention to, and an email. You can also put in an account number. I will warn you on the checks that account number does print there, and sometimes if your checks are, if you don't have your formatting in there correctly, it prints right where you sign your check. So be careful of how that looks. If you do put a vendor account number in there, you're going to want to play with your print settings to make sure that that vendor account number is not printing where you need to sign. A lot of times people just take it out and they'll put it in a memo line or something like that instead if it isn't compatible with your check format. But if they do discounts, I don't know a lot of places that are still using this, but back in the day you could get a so many day discount or whatever. So if that is something that's still being used, you can put in your discounts and define it right underneath the vendor. And then if you have due days, if it's due in 30 days, 15 days, whatever that is, you can actually define that here as well. The last thing over here is 1 check per invoice. I will talk about miscellaneous vendor in a minute, but this 1 check per invoice, if you want to have a separate check for every single invoice that you have out there, you might have 5 or 10 invoices out there that you have to pay for this particular vendor. And if you want to write 1 check per invoice that you have, you check this box. If you want 1 check for all of them and group it together, then you would uncheck that box and it would let you print 1 check for 10 invoices or whatever. And it would still break it down on the stub or show you which invoices you were paying, but it'll give you 1 instead of 10 checks. So just depending on what you want there, you can check or uncheck that box. the paid month to date, year to date, and then the total to date, these actually are modifiable, and I'll tell you why you would want to modify them in a minute, but most of the time you will just let the system, as soon as you do an invoice or you pay an invoice, this automatically updates. And then at the end of the year, when you go to advance your year, you can clear those vendor totals for the following year so that you can start over and keep track of your year-to-date again. And then you also have a little activity button that just kind of gives you a quick overview of how many invoices you've paid and when the last time that you've paid them, how old they are, all of those kinds of things. So this is just some activity that you can look at as well. Now this one only has a little bit of activity, so but you would have other things on there. And it also keeps track of your discounts. Now when I'm setting up a brand new vendor, I'm going to get out of here and click on my new. Again, last name / first name, unless it's an organization, you just type it in, do your name, search address. If this is somebody that you're only going to pay once, it's some refund to a client or it's some witness that you're never going to use again, whatever that is, you can use it as a miscellaneous vendor. So what I usually like to do is set up one miscellaneous vendor right from the get-go, and I just call it miscellaneous or MISC or something like that just so that I can access it, and I mark it as a miscellaneous vendor. And then I can come in and I can use that miscellaneous vendor whenever I have to pay somebody odd that I don't want to clutter it up by creating a new vendor. I don't need them again. I can just use this one that I've created right at the beginning. And once I have that created and I save it, and I'm pretty sure we have one in here, so I'm going to come out here. Actually, you know what? I will save it because if I do, that'll give me a good one to combine here later. All right, so here we go. So let's go back out here, and if I wanted to write an invoice to the miscellaneous vendor, you'll see if I choose miscellaneous and hit my tab key, get back over here, it pops open a box so that I can actually change the address to whoever it is that I want to write this check out and put in their name and address. And I still am using my miscellaneous vendor, but I can change it so that this particular check and invoice that I'm writing out is for John Smith. And the next time I use miscellaneous, it might be James Brown or whoever it is. You can, change that. So that's the beauty of having a miscellaneous vendor already in there. Now, we talked a little bit about what happens when we get more than one vendor for the same vendor. Somebody sets up Cook County and somebody else sets up County Cook or whatever that would be. We do have a way that we can merge the vendors, and that is underneath our renumber. Oops, get over here. I'm sorry, Paul, I'm jumping around here a little bit. There we go. My mouse kind of went crazy here. We got to renumber our vendors. Get back through here. And actually, it's not renumber vendors. I'm sorry. It's merge the invoices. I'm kind of getting off here. It's invoice, transfer invoices. There we go. I'll talk about renumbering them in a minute, but transferring invoices. So what we want to do when we have two vendors that are the same and we want to merge them, we have to pick one and we have to transfer the invoices from one to the other, and then we can delete the one that we want to get rid of. So we have to pick that. So I'm going to just type in MISC and see I've got my MISC and I've got my miscellaneous. So I want to transfer any invoices I have on the miscellaneous vendor, and I want it to go to MISC. And so it would give me my option there, so I'm going to pick that. And then I can even do specific ones, but I actually want to do all of them. So I don't want to pick any range because I want to, any invoices that are under that miscellaneous vendor, I want to move them all to the MISC because then I'm going to delete the miscellaneous vendor. So you kind of get the idea. Once you find the one that you're going to keep, then you can transfer to the one you do want to keep, and then you can go on out and you can delete the one that you want to get rid of. And you might have to, if you've got 3 vendors set up for the court or 4 or whatever, you have to kind of transfer all of them into the one you want to keep and then go out and delete the ones that you want to get rid of. You can also transfer any posted checks, so I'd recommend that you do that. If you're going to be deleting the vendor, you need to get everything moved over. You want both the unpaid and the paid. You want to transfer posted checks, and then I just leave this open. That moves everything to the one vendor, and then I can go ahead and delete. When we have the numbering, and I told you about the decimals that we can use, and maybe you want to renumber some decimals to a real number. You can do that with the renumber vendor. So if I go under my maintenance and go to renumber, I can also do my vendor. And I can say what the old number is, and do it to the new number, just renumber it to whatever I want the new number to be. So if I have 1.00, you know, or 1.02 or something, and I want it to be number 3, I can change that here. And that will move that, and everything associated with it just becomes that new number. It's very similar to renumbering clients. So, any questions?
You were going to show us why it's important, or why you might want to change those numbers.
When you merged. Yes. When you merge, and you might it doesn't change those numbers on here. So if I merge and transfer all the invoices from one to the other, sometimes these numbers here don't reflect that because it's got the original numbers for that vendor. So you may have to come in and check that out and make sure that it actually upped your year-to-date and your month-to-date totals to include that transferred amount that came over. So I would make a note before you transfer what the balances were on these lines and make sure that it does change it. And if it doesn't, come in and make sure that you do that. And that way you'll have accurate numbers. And I'm almost 98% sure that it does not change it, and you have to come in and up it yourself. But in the couple clients that I've helped do it, it's kind of left it, and we just went in and we manually overrode it and just said, okay, we have to add that figure onto here. So be careful when you're transferring those invoices that this does update. Okay? And it will automatically clear at the end of the year when you hit the clear vendor totals, and I should probably show you where that is too. So if we get into our utilities, and actually it's on our maintenance, month year end, clear vendor analysis totals, and it will let you go in and you can clear month to date, year to date, whatever you want to do there, and you can tell what date you want that to be effective. So usually 12/31, 1/1, whatever you want to do before it was you're advancing your year, you can go ahead and clear those. Any questions?
No, there are no questions, Mary Jo. Thanks.
On to you, Paul.
Okay. Well, enough about accounts payable. Let's talk about tabs and how things changed when we got to version 16.1. If we look at the client file in tabs, we used to be able to specify the address and the information about the contact right here in this record. In version 16.1, the people at STI, wisely I believe, although it provides some frustration for some people, decided that they would start storing all the client information in the contact file. What this means is that in the past, a couple things. If you wanted to have contact information stored in the contact file for your clients, you would have to enter that separately into the contact file. And there's nothing worse in my mind than having multiple places to store the same information. So storing it here in the client record in versions prior to version 16.1 was not enough to also get it into the contact file. What that also meant then was that if you had a client with a lot of different matters, it was possible to end up with a lot of different variations of the address here in these screens, because you were, although it was defaulting, you could change the address for each individual matter. Now, sometimes you want to. You might have 2 locations for a bank that you're doing work for, or you might have an insurance company that has an Indianapolis office and a Fort Wayne office, both of which that you're doing work for. So that's good. However, in the old system, if you had a client that had, let's say, 100 matters, and they were split, just for the sake of discussion, evenly between 2 locations, then when you went in and one of those locations had a change of address, you might have to go into 50 different matters to change that address. Not very effective, not a good way to do things. And so the people at STI said, well, we're going to change that. Now, if I pull up a matter here, let's pull up John Williams. One thing that you immediately notice when you see this is that if you start to type in here, in these shaded areas, it tells you click the hyperlink next to the client name to open the contact information window to change this information. What that means is really this is where that information lives. And this person has to have the same contact and client. Let's go to Mega Construction corporate client here. Here we go. Here at Mega Construction, we have one person that gets the bills, probably someone who works at Mega Construction. Yes, that's correct. And then we have the company itself organized or indicated here. So if we want to change the client address or the contact information or the phone number or the email address, we can no longer do it here. We have to go down into the record. Now, what some people would do is they would go in here and say, well, no, this bill doesn't go to their Manhattan, New York address. It goes to another address in Buffalo. And so they would change it here. What you're doing, if you're doing that, is you're changing one contact record that may affect hundreds, dozens, thousands, you pick a number, may affect a lot of different matters. If you have to change to a different location for this client, you have to first look and see if you have a contact record for that different location. Sorted by contact ID, I see that we only have one entry for Mega Construction Corporation. I would have to add a different location and then assign this particular matter to that location. So don't just go in here and change things kind of pell-mell. If you want to change, oh, well, we have a direct dial phone number for this guy, or we have a different fax number that we're using for this matter, or we have a different location. Keep in mind that you now have a one-to-many sort of relationship. You have one contact, and it may be tied to dozens and dozens of different matters. And just going into the contact record and changing those things could be disastrous. Now, another thing to keep in mind is, now that the contact file is where all this comes from, if you go over to PracticeMaster and we go into the contact file and we look up Mega Construction, look at that. They're there. And so if somebody goes into the PracticeMaster contact file and changes that address, they're going to get a notice, a warning that says you have changed the address or email address for a contact who is used on one or more matters. This could affect where statements are sent. The following matters will be affected. Now I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And now I'm going to go back to Tabs. And I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to call it up again. Just go back to Mega. And as you can see, I changed it there too. So what this means is you need, if you are the person who's in charge of billing, to make your users that may be making changes to contacts in PracticeMaster aware of the fact that if they get this message here, they had better pay attention to it, because it's going to affect how the firm gets paid, and therefore, this is how I like to say it, how they get paid. If they mess up this record and this client doesn't get their bill right and therefore they don't pay it right, then the firm is not going to get that payment in a timely manner, or may not get it at all. So we need to make sure users are aware of this. Now, if that makes you a little bit nervous, there are a couple things we can do. For one thing, if you have history tracking set on, which is probably a different topic that I don't want to get into now, but it probably is set on for your contact file for the right fields, you can go into PracticeMaster and pull up what we call the display history screen, and it will show you, and this is me saving the record, this is the display history screen, and it shows you that this was changed from street to street by the blank user. This would have the user's initials or username, however they log in, on this date, and then it was changed back from ST to street by that same user a few minutes later. So if you do find that someone has changed something on a billing record that needs to be changed back, one thing that might reassure you a little bit is that this display history is going to show you the history of those changes. I recommend, if you come in here and there are a lot of changes, that you look at it in what we call date order recent first. And that'll just show it to you with the most recent changes, the ones that probably are the ones you're looking to affect. Okay?
I have a question, Paul.
You have a question? You have a question, Leanne?
Well, I don't have a question.
Okay.
Question to read you. Is this topic only pertinent if you have both PracticeMaster and Tabs3?
The topic itself is not. Tabs will still use a contact file as opposed to the old way of having the address information stored in the client file. This specific issue that I'm describing right now, where you have to watch out for users, is pretty much limited to people that have users out there in PracticeMaster. So if by this topic you meant this subtopic of this broader topic of contacts and clients, yes, this is specific to PracticeMaster. Now, another thing that can be done, and we recommend this, we usually do this in a variety of different ways to monitor what sorts of changes are being made to contacts, is that you can add a workflow. And again, this is something that's, hold on one second, we might have a follow-up question.
The follow-up question was, so the changes for an address should only be made in the contact file?
They can only be made in the contact file. If we go back to Tabs and try to make changes right here, it won't let us. It tells us we need to click the hyperlink next to client name, and when we do that, we actually are in the contact file. So even if you only have Tabs, you still do have access to this contact file, and that's where the changes are going to be made. It will not let you do them somewhere else. As soon as I start typing, it says, nope, can't do that. You need to click this blue link and go into the contact file. Now, what I was talking about where you have the danger of users changing things in PracticeMaster, that could still happen here in Tabs, but it's much, much less likely because users are really, other than the accounting department or the billing people, they're not in here, and they're probably not allowed in here. Whereas in PracticeMaster, it's a little bit more prevalent that users would be allowed into the contact file where they could maybe change a billing record. One last way to protect your data, if you're an administrator that's looking at this as a problem, which I think it is sometimes, is with a workflow. Again, I'm not going to go into how to build a workflow, but I'm going to explain the concept. A workflow is something that runs when something happens. For instance, you can set up a workflow that whenever a record is changed in the contact file, it does something. One of the things it can do, if you have PracticeMaster Platinum, it can send an e-note with that record linked to it to the person who does the billing. So they can look at that record and say, oh, yeah, somebody changed that and they shouldn't have. I better fix that. Another thing that can happen is that can generate an email. Now, the difference between an e-note and an email is that an e-note can go in the background without the person who made the change being aware that that e-note's going. An email can simply be started. It will not be sent automatically, which means that the user who made the change would have to send that email to the administrator after it was started by the workflow. My favorite way, however, to manage changes that could affect billing in the contact file is to add a field somewhere in here that says date. It doesn't even have to display, but it can. Date of last change, and maybe even it records the initials for the username of the person who made the last change. And when a user changes or adds a record, you may not care if it's one that's added, but one that's changed you may want to know about, it can, in the background, take the date, time, and the user's username, put it in those fields, and then the person that's running the billing system can use those fields, a filter, a report, to print a list of changes since the last time they checked. So 3 ways that you can use workflows to track changes that are going on in the contact system. One is that it would force the sending of an e-note surreptitiously in the background to the billing administrator saying that this person made this change to this contact record on this date. Another would be an email, which doesn't work very well because the person who made the change has to send that email. And the third would be to have a workflow that logs the date and initials or date and username of the person that's made that change. Another question, Leanne? Okay. Now, looking at my notes here, I think that's about everything. One thing that I want to, while I have time, touch on is the fact that you will see that Mega Construction is a contact in PracticeMaster, just like they are here. And when you look at them here in Tabs and in PracticeMaster, you'll see that they are an organization. And if you look at James Totke, he is an individual at Mega Construction. So you have this new hierarchical structure that allows you to say that we have Mega Construction Corporation as an organization, and underneath that we have 4 individuals. And by setting these records up this way, where these individuals are individuals at this organization, then when we go into the organization record and make a change to something that's business related or organization related, like the business address or the business phone or fax or the web page, these are all things that are tied to the organization, they will, if you deem necessary, force those same changes down to the individuals. It allows you to have an organization that maintains a constant business address, and that when it changes, it pushes down to the appropriate individuals that work at that or are tied to that organization. Now, a couple more things real quick before we cut off here. This, when it happened, created duplicate contacts for some people. Maybe some people had created records for Mega Construction Corporation where street was spelled out, different matters where street was spelled out, and others had created matters where street was abbreviated as ST. And the list goes on and on. The suite could have been abbreviated. All sorts of things could have been happening to make these addresses different. When Tabs and PracticeMaster converted your clients into contacts during the conversion from 15 to 16, it may have created duplicate and multiple records there. So one of the topics that we're going to have for next month's virtual user group meeting for PracticeMaster is going to have to do with how to rename and how to combine these contacts. So if you've got contacts that are named improperly, we can fix that. And if you've got contacts that have multiple records when they should only have one, we can fix that too. I'm not going to tell you how now. Tune in next month. And so with that, I'm going to let you know that our topics for all 3 of our virtual user group meetings for next month are as follows. Our June World Docs virtual user group meeting will deal with the button bar and also column layout, so how to change words and pictures and what shows up on your button bar, and how to change the fields that show up in your columns for your file lists. Our June Tabs 3 virtual user group meeting will be about split fee billing, and not only how it is now, but a little look at how it's going to be in version 17 because it's being rewritten for 17, and also all the different options for charging different rates for your clients and their matters. So Tabs 3 in June, split fee billing and all your rate options. And for PracticeMaster in June, it's going to be converting to fees from things like journal records and timer records and phone notes and emails that are in PracticeMaster, how to convert those into fees instantly. And while we're on the subject, we're also going to talk about, oh, no, I'm sorry, that's me misremembering. And also how to clean up those duplicate contact records and how to rename them, which I just mentioned when I was talking about that here. So if there aren't any more questions, Leanne, I am going to go ahead and cut for this month. Everybody have a good day and a good rest of the month, and we will see you in June. Thanks much.